So welcome to a new video. This week the topic is stress. So we're just going to go over a few ways that you can reduce stress in your life now. So stress, what is it? Like you hear about it all the time and you're not really sure what to do about it. And most of the time we don't even really know if we do have stress. So I know personally, earlier on in my life, I used to get told all the time to slow down, reduce stress, and I didn't actually believe that I was stressed because, the all or nothing attitude and way of life was the only way that I knew. So, and I also didn't know that stresses can encompass a whole bunch of other things. So it's not just about running around all day. Like stress can also be dissociation, it can be fatigue, it can be gut health, it can be depression, anxiety, it can be lots of different things. So I'll just make a short video about it, just a little introduction, and then we might go deeper into it in future videos if anyone is interested. So what is stress? So stress is when the body thinks it's in danger. So it doesn't have to be a concrete thing that you believe to be stressful. It just has to be something that your body believes to be stressful. And a lot of that runs unconsciously. So we have a mechanism within our nervous system. It's called the autonomic nervous system. It's one of the branches that controls the body function unconsciously. And what it does is it manages the stress response, which you might know as the fight or flight response. So when we're relaxed, we're in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is otherwise known as rest and digest. You might have heard it like that. And then we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response. Okay, so there's two opposing arms and they can't both be switched on the same time. So if you're told to reduce stress, or if you think you're stressed, it basically just means that your body is in a bit of a chronic state of fight or flight and it's having a lot of trouble balancing back into rest and digest. Okay, so that's a really quick introduction. The physiological feeling of stress can be identified by like racing heart, blood pooling in your arms and legs, anxiety, a rise in blood pressure, really sharp tunnel thinking, like black or white thinking, catastrophic thinking even, and anxiety. So they're kind of the most common things that you'll experience, because what happens is that the blood, it shuns away from the organs and into your arms and legs so that you can run for your life. So whether it be a meeting that you're stressed about, or a relationship conflict, or a friend, or something like a car accident, like a tangible physical thing like that, then the body just thinks it's the physical thing. It doesn't understand the difference between a real threat and an imagined threat, or a psychological threat and a threat that is actually dangerous to the body. So that's the quick overview of what stress is. So now let's go into a few ways in which that you can start reducing it. My first tip is to learn what a stressor is and what it feels like for you personally. So a stressor, as I explained before, can be a multitude of things. So there's 4 main categories that you can look into, and that is physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, and psychospiritual stress. So chemical stress would be things like makeup products, food additives, pesticide, car fumes, stuff like that. Then you have emotional stress that can be like anxiety, depression, bad relationships, trouble with your child, trauma, things like that. Then you've got psychological stress, which is a little bit more, I guess you'd say, affects your mental functioning, not so much as your physical functioning. So that being, again, depression, anxiety, PTSD, learning difficulties like ADD and dyslexia, they can be considered a stressor too. And then you've got psychospiritual stress, which is a little bit more of a woo-woo one, but I love it, which is something like feeling like you're not living up to your potential, feeling like there's a greater meaning and you're not in touch with that. So there's lots of different stressors, and it's really good to work out what you have that could be a stressor by kind of taking stock of your life and analyzing all those different aspects. Like for example, if you're having eczema, it's likely that you're having an issue with either your deodorant, or your liver's having an issue with detoxification, or your lymph is backed up. So there's things like that. If you're having depression or anxiety symptoms, then maybe you have something like caffeine intolerance, maybe your blood sugar's imbalanced, maybe you have a gut issue, maybe you have neuroinflammation, maybe you have trauma, so there's all these different kind of ways that you can look into it. But it's very important to identify if you have stress, and then also what it feels like for you. So for me personally, if I'm stressed out, I will lose sleep. So I'll just wake up at 2 a.m. or I won't be able to go to sleep or something like that. That is a starting surefire sign that I'm under stress, whether I know it or not. I have a very high tolerance to stress because I've experienced a lot of stress in my life. So what will happen is my body will respond to the stressor before I sort of catch up. Like I'll already try and adapt, and I'll recognize unconsciously that there's something stressful, and then I'll already make it into something good, but then my body's still suffering. And then another thing is I'll put on heaps of water weight, I'll kind of blow up, my gut will slow down, and my training won't feel as good. So I might also, feel angry or, cry for no reason, something like that. So there's a lot of signs that I'll have that will tell me that I am too stressed. And so my first tip is to see if you can identify within yourself what those things are. And then my second tip is to intentionally teach the body how to switch back. So once you've identified that you're in stress, you need to work out what type of tool is going to be helpful for you to get your body back into rest and digest. So suggestions for something like that involve meditation, breathing exercises, going for a walk in the park, watching your favorite movie, finding something that makes you feel joy, listening to music, whatever it is. So for me personally, like my best one, the easiest one for me to do is chuck my headphones on and go for a walk outside when it's dark. So I love doing that. It helps bring my heart rate down. I really relax. I don't know what it is. It's something about the quiet and the dark, it makes me feel amazing. And I've just got certain playlists that I play. So you can get, songs that you find, I guess, really liven you up and kind of take you out of your funk, and make that as a playlist. I have one called like Wake Up Motivational, something like that. So if I'm feeling like really stressed out and I'm not thinking logically, then I can put that on. And I also have things like drumming sounds, meditation music, and something called box breathing, which is where you just breathe deep into your belly. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and breathe back in for 4. And you just keep repeating that cycle until you start to feel your heart rate slow down. Okay, so that's the second one. So that's to find ways in which you can lower your stress immediately. And just note as well with that one that it can take time to find what those things are. So I experimented with a lot of different things. So drawing is another one for me too. Yeah, or even playing music. I love to do that. Everyone's got different thing that they love to do. Sometimes hanging out with kids is actually going to reduce your stress because you're focusing on them and not you. And obviously they're your children, so they're going to bring you feelings of joy. Okay, so the third tip that I have for you is to try and start resetting your circadian rhythm. So that is the sleep-wake cycle of the body. It runs unconsciously, driven by the brain and nervous system, and it basically dictates when you're going to be awake and alert and when you're going to be asleep and relaxed. So we all have this natural rhythm within our body, but most people's is a little bit skewed. So things like blue light at night from the television, absolutely coming from our phones, high stress levels, caffeine, sugar or blood sugar imbalance, where it's constantly spiking up and crashing down again. These things can mess with the circadian rhythm, and it means that when you want to get a restful sleep, you can't, because you can't switch off, you can't relax, you can't get into a restful state. So the best things that you can do for resetting your circadian rhythm, there's a couple of really easy tips. One is to get really early sunlight. So that is to just look at the sun as it just rises up over the horizon. The second one is to get blue light blocking glasses. You can get them from, I have Baxter Blue, so the website is baxterblue.com. I'll link it below. And it's only about $80 for a pair of glasses, and they are completely effective. So many of my clients have bought them, like based on this recommendation, and they'll say like, I can't even watch my computer at night because it makes me sleepy. So that's the whole point of those glasses. And there's other things you can do, like change your phone screen so that it goes red, because you want to block out all the blue light. Like for example, I can show you mine. So red, as you can see, it's kind of hard to look at. But when you actually look at it at night, it doesn't stimulate your brain. So yeah, there's things like that. So setting up night mode, they all come on most of your devices. So Apple devices, iPads, laptops, Macs, iPhone, Samsung Galaxy, they all have night mode. So I would utilize that as much as you can, because it'll block that blue light frequency from telling your brain that it's daytime. So the fourth tip that I have for you is to eat good food and eat it intentionally. So that means planning your food in advance, buying foods that you know to be healthful, and everybody knows what that is. So generally whole grains, fruit, vegetables, lean meats, and nuts, dark chocolate, olive oil, things like that. So anything that comes sort of straight off a tree or straight out of the ground is something that you could consider a whole food. And the more of those you eat, the better. So what happens with a junk food diet is it messes with your hormonal function. So if you're having too much sugar at the wrong times of day, then this can throw off your sleep-wake cycle as well. And it can also give you way too much energy at the wrong time of day. And then we have things like caloric restriction or gut health issues, which can come from a really poor diet that actually set the body into stress. So if you're somebody who, say, diets a lot, you're always on a deficit, always exercising really hard, this might actually be too much for you. So that's what we would call a physical stressor. So it's basically overloading the body and telling it is in stress. So then it tries to retreat, tries to pull all the energy back, and you might find yourself being fatigued or not being able to sleep. So as far as food's concerned, you're wanting to balance your blood sugar by making choices in food which are low glycemic index, and you can find that really easily online. It's a tool for diabetics. So there's two terms, one is glycemic index and one is glycemic load. And when you get foods that have a low load of both, they're not going to spike your blood sugar like something like red frogs would. Okay, and then just ensuring that you're eating enough food every day will also help, and keeping caffeine consumption to a limit before 2 p.m. And if you're really caffeine sensitive, then zero caffeine is always going to be the best approach. And the last one that I have for you is to take ownership. So this is pretty much one of the biggest tools that would apply to absolutely anything that you're trying to improve in your life. So it goes into the stress bucket as well. If you're not taking ownership of your behavior, your lifestyle, your eating habits, your personality traits, your sleep hygiene, your alcohol consumption and all of that kind of thing, then things probably aren't going to improve very much. So generally what can happen is basically we're in a high stress state and then we adapt to that over time, and then we start layering on all of these behavioral adaptations and dietary adaptations and behaviors that make it easier to cope with the stress. So then when we find out we have to reduce it, short of becoming a totally different person, sometimes we don't actually know what to do. So the first thing is just to say, you know what, I acknowledge the fact that I'm doing things that are too much. You know, for example, when I learned this, finally actually accepted it. So I didn't take ownership for a good, until I got chronic fatigue syndrome. And even then I really struggled. So, you know, I would say, but I don't want to work less because I have to have this much money, or I don't want to eat organic because it's too expensive, or I don't want to quit caffeine because without caffeine, my brain doesn't function, etc., etc. You know, and then I had all these other stresses like emotional stress, toxic relationships, toxic friendships, lots of stuff like that. So a lot of unresolved emotional trauma too. And these were all compounding like layer upon layer upon layer to create a foundation that was completely stressed out and eventually non-functional. And then the way that I repaired that, like I didn't look at stress directly, but now when I look in hindsight, I recognize that every single practice that I brought into my life, all it did was reduce the stress within my nervous system. That was it. So improved my diet, didn't eat sugar, didn't buy any fast food, stopped drinking alcohol, lowered my caffeine consumption, stopped overtraining, cut back my client base, changed my working scenario so I didn't have to work as much, started meditation, practiced some breathing things, got a bit of a spiritual practice together, you know, where I wrote a gratitude journal. I collected crystals for a while and it helped me reduce stress, but it's one of the things that I just tried. You know, I also took up guitar, went for a walk every day, took more time out for myself because before I got chronic fatigue syndrome, it was almost impossible for me because I was just too highly strung. So I couldn't handle it. If I went to the beach and there was nothing going on, I couldn't handle it. My brain would just go crazy and then I just want to come straight back. You know, so I had to do things like accept that I had to slow down. And then when I did slow down and I experienced all these uncomfortable thoughts and emotions and stuff bubbling up, I was like, all right, I understand that I have to deal with this now because this is why I'm stressed. The reason why I'm going so hard in life is because I'm not addressing all of these underlying emotional themes and they just keep bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up until they completely stress my body to the point of to a breaking point, or, you know, what you would call like a nervous breakdown. You know, so it's all a little bit of practice, trial and error, but the first thing you have to do is take ownership. And if you don't take ownership, then things are not going to improve. Okay, so those are my 5 recommendations. So just to recap really quick, stress is when the body thinks it's in danger, whether real or imagined. Stress can be physical, emotional, chemical, or psychospiritual. My first tip was to learn to identify what a stressor feels like in your body and what those stresses might be. My second tip was to intentionally bring in practices to try and lower stress. My third tip was to correct your circadian rhythm. The fourth is to eat good nutrition intentionally, and I cannot highlight enough to reduce alcohol consumption. And my 5th tip is to take ownership. So with all that being said, the other thing I want to mention is the benefits that you're going to get if you actually start trying to do this. So there's two states that we can exist in, which is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, as I mentioned before. So remember, the parasympathetic system is the rest and digest, and the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight, and we can't be in both of them at the same time. So we're either relaxed or we're stressed. So if the stress load is too high from those four categories that I mentioned, and it all just keeps piling up and we're not doing anything to bring the body back down into baseline, sometimes it can forget, and we actually get stuck in what we call sympathetic dominance. And when you're stuck in sympathetic dominance, that means that you have chronic stress symptoms. So what that can look like is often feeling anxious and having scrambling thoughts, being hyper analytical or hyper emotional, or being black and white in your thinking, struggling with creativity and not having any unique ideas, feeling like the world's out to get you, so that doomsday attitude, feeling disconnected from your true self. So, who is she? What does she do? I don't even know myself anymore. That's a sign of sympathetic dominance. You might feel rigid and combative, so you're not willing to take on feedback. You probably won't want to take ownership. It's really hard to change your lifestyle when you're in sympathetic dominance, because you really have to, come at it from a different personality standpoint. You can't do it in the state that you're in. You have to kind of do it from your higher self perspective. You might struggle with your health and with weight loss if that's what you desire, because cortisol is too high in the body when you're chronically stressed, and it actually blocks the capacity to lose fat. It actually, in fact, increases the capacity to burn muscle. You generally can't relax or have fun, and you might experience much more negative emotions. So that's what a sympathetic dominant state looks like. And just to give you a little bit of inspiration, or like a light at the other end of the tunnel, I'll explain to you what a parasympathetic dominance or a healthy fight, flight, rest and digest system might look like. You'll be able to make decisions with ease. You'll feel more joy, because stress is a thief of joy. It's very hard to feel joyful when you're running from a dinosaur all the time. The body will be healthier and able to heal. You'll sleep really well. You'll digest food better. It's easier to foster and nurture really great friendships and relationships. You're going to be way more creative and original. You can connect in with your deeper wisdom and gut instincts better, assimilate nutrients better, and feel more positive emotions. So that's it for stress, just a really quick introduction. If you're interested in learning more about stress, let me know in the comments or send me a message. But that's it for now, just simple ways that you can start reducing stress in your life now. So I'll see you in the next video.